Thanks again to the Giz organizers. I think they've put together an amazing lineup of speakers for you. The last speaker, Will, did a pretty good job. I'm going to be spending the next 10 minutes. Can I have a clicker? And what we see as how the web is evolving on mobile. And the focus is going to be next generation technologies. You guys have seen some pretty amazing stuff recently happen on web, right? There's some pretty exciting things like web frameworks we're seeing. Obviously the browsing technologies have evolved to a great deal of extent. My slides are not showing up, so just give me 1 second. Guess I have 10 minutes. I'm already lost 1 minute already on technical difficulties. A little bit about myself. Yes, I've spent 10 years at BlackBerry. My first few jobs were actually as a web developer. For me, home is Canada, but my local host in the region is Singapore. I'm based out of Singapore. Couple of personal things about me. I'm addicted to tea, and specifically the kind of tea that you guys actually enjoy every single day. It's a luxury. It's not easy to find in Canada or other places. And I completely detest expensive lattes. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, that's my Twitter handle. So let me take you back 14 billion years, back to the Big Bang. I've always been fascinated about cosmology, and the most interesting thing about that is the process of nucleosynthesis, right? So just imagine for a second, everything that you see today that's built, all of that was created based on some basic building blocks, helium and hydrogen, right? And what's more fascinating is that most of the helium and hydrogen that exists in the universe, not just on Earth, in the universe, was created in the first 3 minutes of the universe, 3 minutes after the Big Bang. That's crazy, right? All the later elements, the more complex elements, came much later when stars were formed, and I don't want to get into too much detail, but that's exciting. That nucleosynthesis, having those basic building blocks and building something more complex, that's a huge process, and the rest is just 14 million years of history. You look at the web today, kind of the same thing has happened. The web is expanding like the universe, right? You've seen, from basic websites and HTML5, HTML 1.0, like you see more complex components of the webs, more complex frameworks, more complex technologies that are evolving. That's pretty exciting. So I'm going to talk to you about building the next generation mobile web browser using pure web technologies. Yes, you heard me right. Using pure web technologies to build the next generation browser. And this is on BlackBerry 10. The beginnings of this movement is on BlackBerry 10. Everything built using web. And this is a commercially available product. It's not a experiment. It's not a an idea. So I'm not here to tell you how amazing the browser is, but really share some insights on how we built this thing, why we built it, and where it's going. So what do we mean by next generation? Like, how do you measure that, right? Obviously, there's a bunch of standards and tests and things like that on the web that you can find. But if you look actually at a 1024 feet view, to build a solid browser, you need a solid platform. So the BlackBerry 10 platform and the web platform is built on the industry-leading Qnx operating system. If you don't know Qnx, you probably use it every day. If you drive a car that has a navigation system, it's probably based on Qnx. If you go to the hospital and you see these amazing, funky, advanced machinery and medical systems that you don't understand how they work, they obviously have an operating system on it. They have a visual display. Oops, I lost the cap. That's running Qnx. If you flick on the light switch in your home, if electricity is coming from a power plant or a wind turbine, it's probably running Qnx. Yes, Qnx has been there since 1982. It's an industry-leading embedded real-time operating system. It's reliable, it's POSIX certified, and there's very few competitors to it. So you should definitely look it up. There's a lot of exciting stuff around it. So that's what it's built on. This is an industry-proven system, and that's what the web platform is actually built on. Obviously, we're a big contributor to WebKit. We support all the standards and consortiums. And the browser application was built on this platform using pure web technologies like HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript. So before I actually show you the demo, and I have a long snake with me that's connected to my device there, but let's take a metaphor. So what do we mean by, like, what's an amazing browser, right? So for me, I like analogies, and for me, it's the perfect coverage to just do native. You know, there's this perception out there, well, native is for performance, and web is, you know, for everything else. But we wanted to actually change, we wanted to challenge ourselves. We wanted to challenge the perception. You know, we wanted to be leaders in HTML5 development, right? And we'll show you how we are. The implementation, again, we wanted to show that if done right, if your foundations are correct, that you could actually get the performance that you intend on achieving. So there's no compromises to performance. And the developer experience, we found that developers actually enjoyed web tools. You know, Cloud9, there's so many other kinds of IDEs that are out there. People like staying on web. People like, you know, every time that you have to install something, you hate it, right? You hate installing tools, you hate installing, you know, getting outside your comfort zone. You like web because you know what to expect. So, you know, we wanted to actually stick to those principles, and our community, our tooling, they all follow that. In fact, we actually have an SDK where you can build web applications from your browser. You don't have to leave your browser to build web apps. Why else? Well, we also wanted to push our boundaries. It's like eating your own dog food, right? So if you think this is so great, then well, why don't you build your own browser with this, right? And the secret sauce was web views. So everything you're going to see can be taken apart into different kind of web views. There's two kinds of web views. There's content web views, which is on the right-hand side. So that's like your actual content, pretty straightforward. But everything else, the address bar, the navigation, the settings, the controls, the menus, the action bars, everything is pure web. It's a web view. It's a Chrome web view that it's actually running. And it's really fascinating when you actually see it. So let me show you the experience, what it's like. What do we mean by an amazing experience? So can we switch to the HDMI here on my Z10? So here's a pretty standard browser. You know, you've got, you know, I don't know if you watched the IPL last night. It was a pretty interesting match. But, you know, what was it, Sunrisers versus the Super Kings, right? So pretty standard browser. You've got a navigation pane. That's all web, right? So before we actually talk about web experience, what does a native experience look like? So here's the native pictures application, if you will, right? Standard navigation at the bottom, right? You've got a crosscut menu that lets you select stuff. You know, there's some contextual stuff. If you press and highlight, you know, picture, you know, you're able to do a bunch of things on the right-hand side for context. You know, you can share it, you can set as wallpaper, things like that. This is a native application, which is not web, okay? Now here is a browser which is done using pure HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript, and has the same experience. So you can go on a web page, just load the IPL one here. You know, bunch of photos from last night's game. All your options are here in the menu. You know, you can see, look at the seamless transitions. Look at the control that I have, right? You know, there's this concept of peeking that we've implemented as well. So if you're actually within settings, for example, right, you can actually peek back at your content. This is all done in web. So look at the transitions and the smoothness. If you've actually got content, contextual content, so whether it's images, videos, whatever, you know, text you want to select, I can hold a picture, you know, touch down on the picture, and then you get this context menu show up on the right. Similarly, you can save the image, share it, do whatever you want. All done using pure web technologies. Can we switch back to the slides for a second? So that's what I mean by an amazing experience. Like, it's intuitive, you know what to expect. There's no difference between what the native experience is like on other applications like the picture app and this browser. So it actually, you know, withstands the test. Fidelity. Okay, I'm not going to brag about this, but you know, you can go check the HTML5 test website, click on compare, click on browsers, check on what's the #1 browser there for HTML5 compliance. I challenge you to see if anybody else actually leads in compliance. But not just that. Obviously, we have a bunch of different you know, standards that we've supported, like, you know, Sencha 2.1 supports it. We support Dojo. We support PhoneGap. All those are open frameworks. WebGL, you know, and WebGL is actually quite interesting because it's very few browsers out there on mobile do a good job of implementing it. So right now, I don't know if this will work because the Wi-Fi is really, really slow. But there's this recent game that was done on WebGL, and this is really, you know, to show you how we push the boundaries with 3D graphics and hardware accelerated graphics. this is a pure WebGL game. This is my browser. I'm not trying to mask this with a web application. This is actually loading that website, and you can try it out as well. Let's look for Pearl Boy. So look at the shaders and textures, so you can actually, control this boat, and look at the effects, the shaders, the textures on this game. And how smooth the performance is. All done using WebGL. This is running in the browser, not an app. Okay. Now, what else can we do? Let's go back to bookmarks here. A lot of people think that there's some things you always do a native app for. Well, here's the camera, the media capture functionality that you can see. This is again from my browser. This is not an application, right? You can do front and back. You can control all those things. So all this stuff, thanks to HTML5, is there, and I think it's really paved the way. Can we switch back to the slides? For what we're seeing as a strong standards-based movement for the next mobile revolution, and I'll show you what that looks like. This thing is batteries are. The third ingredient that we have is performance. And you can actually look at different kinds of performance. Obviously, even CSS3 is hardware accelerated, similar to WebGL. So performance, obviously, there's a bunch of GPU tests out there. I think the best one I've seen is there's a Space Blaster game. You can look at this origami sample that's been done. That's pretty interesting. That shows you how smooth the transitions can be with CSS3. So you don't actually have to use WebGL, but CSS3 is actually quite good. And that's proof that with the way we've done our own transitions on the browser itself. There's this Web Blaster game that actually measures FPS. And it really pushes the CPU to its limit. And you can see on the top right, we're doing about 54, 57 FPS, and you'll see it starts to get really busy. It'll be like a bunch of animations happening at the same time. CPU is also kind of being utilized quite high there. Right. So no compromise on performance. Back to the slides, please. So how does it look like? How do we do this, right? So if you look like inside the application, I already shared the magic we've done with web views and separating all the Chrome content that's offline with the actual tabs, which each tab is a separate web view. But basically, there's a couple of processes, and the first one is managing the actual Chrome, the actual browser, physical Chrome for the browser, the navigation bar, the web view, the bookmarks that you saw. The second one is actually managing the content, which is quite interesting. But it wasn't easy, right? We ran into a lot of issues. There were issues we had to figure out with disk access, Windows animations, the peaking that you saw, web overlays and things like that. Obviously, we can't get into details, but it wasn't easy. We learned a lot of lessons along the way. Animating block height is still a major issue with most UI frameworks. When you actually make a change to something, and how does it affect, the subsequent content. So that's something we're still struggling with. We're trying to find solutions for that. Web is fundamentally single-threaded. I think the way the sequence happens for web, you got to get your CSS first. You got to get your JavaScript. Then you got to parse the HTML, parse those things. So that has to happen in a sequence, right? So I think that's something we're fundamentally struggling with, because the platform is a multi-threaded platform that can do a lot of these things that we did in the browser. So we have to respect that, and hopefully the standards evolve to beyond that. But I think overall, I think we withstood the test. We've got an amazing browser built for web using the web. We have good performance. We've got rich and responsive UI, and I think this is a proof that what's to come is quite exciting. And don't take it from us. We've had an amazing response from the community where people have been really happy with this browser, and this is what some of the comments that we've received from the community. Now the future, what does it look like? What does this mean for you? And what does it mean for the overall web ecosystem? Well, we feel we've raised the bar. We've said, really, it's the first browser out there in market that's on a commercial device that's using web technologies. So we think this is really exciting. I think the standards are going to start to evolve more. And they do need to. There's a lot of stuff, that HTML5 is still a long way out. from being adopted widely, we feel. So lots of exciting stuff coming. I want to leave you with the future of what it actually means for us. The web platform is actually used not only in the browser, it's also used by our SDK for building applications. So you as a developer can use the same platform to build your applications just like this browser. But we also have something called the Qnx Car Sdk. And Will talked about self-driving cars. So it's funny actually he mentioned that because I'll be covering that in the next video. And it shows you that this web platform is in fact used by our Qnx Car platform, which is used in over 250 different manufacturers and vehicles. So before that, just a few housekeeping notes. If you want to learn more about how to blur the boundary between web and native, come to our 1220 session. There's a bunch of information on our website if you're interested in, on the open source side of things. If you're participating in the contest, please make sure you submit your application before 6 p.m. today. We'll be announcing winners tomorrow. And I leave you with a sneak peek of how HTML5 and web are on the center of this whole machine-to-machine revolution that we're seeing in the industry, the mobile computing platform. So let's take a look at what that looks like, a few years from now.
Hello, Samuel.
Not in my lifetime. Can't believe everything you read on the computer.
August the 14th.
Can we turn up the volume for this?
Dad, you have to see what they're working on. Cars that drive by themselves.
Hello, Samuel.
Not in my lifetime. Can't believe everything you read on the computer.
August the 14th. Agenda shows you're visiting your sister today. There's an accident on Anderson Avenue. Shortest detour adds 10 minutes.
Accept detour?
Shall I inform Sarah you will be late?
Yes.
Translating.
Book appointment for tomorrow at 5:30. Dad, it says here the cars will actually talk to each other and exchange information. Like how many potholes are up ahead.
Anyway, I think we're having some technical difficulty, but you saw that dashboard that you saw, that's actually, that SDK for that dashboard, it actually exists today. That's something that a lot of car manufacturers are using. You can check out some of the videos from CES, look for the Bentley video.